Coming up, the Trade Secretary and Minister for Women and Equalities, Liz Truss. She used to be a Liberal Democrat until she discovered she was actually a Tory. She used to be staunchly pro-European Union and a sensible Tory, until after the referendum when she discovered she was actually a swivel-eyed Brexiter. In 2019, she declared her leadership bid for the Tory party, until she discovered that she actually wanted to endorse Boris Johnson instead. Hypocrisy? Indecisiveness? Or just naked political opportunism? Let's take a closer look. Keep watching. If you enjoy these videos, please click the like button, subscribe and get notified of new videos every Wednesday and Saturday. And before we really get into it, can I just take this opportunity to share with you once more my favourite clip of a Tory politician attempting stand-up comedy. Enjoy.
In December, I'll be in Beijing, opening up new pork markets.
But more seriously, Liz Truss first got my attention during the Article 50 debacle. You probably remember those headlines in the Telegraph and the hate-filled Daily Mail, lambasting the 3 High Court judges who had the temerity to insist that the law did actually indeed apply to the government, and that in order to trigger Article 50 and start the process of leaving the European Union, that Parliament should get to vote on it. You know, taking back control, sovereignty of Parliament and all that. At that time, Liz Truss was Secretary of State for Justice and Lord Chancellor, and her job was to act as the constitutional protector of the judiciary. I remember her signally failing to do this and saying that she was unable to criticise the media in her role. The Lord Chief Justice described this claim as completely and utterly wrong, and I agreed with him. The term enemies of the people has its origins in the French Revolution and applied to people deemed to be trying to divide or trouble the people, and the punishment was usually death by guillotine. These threats from the right-wing press were basically an incitement to murder, but Ms. Truss was not moved to criticise them. I think that was pathetic. Lord Falconer, the former Lord Chancellor, remarked that Liz Truss didn't have the legal expertise constitutionally required for her role and should be sacked for signalling to judges that they had lost their constitutional protector. Under Boris Johnson, as a reward for her support in the leadership contest, our Ms. Truss was consequently handed the role of Secretary of State for International Trade. It wasn't long before she was in trouble again, this time admitting that her department had inadvertently allowed shipping of military supplies to Saudi Arabia in contravention of an order from the Court of Appeal. What is it she has against judges, I wonder? Like with so many of the current cabinet, these law-breaking acts led to absolutely no sanction against her whatsoever. But there's 2 reasons right there why she is unfit for office. And another is that last year, a series of meetings she held about economic affairs with external bodies were removed from the public record. Quite what she managed to hide, we don't know, but it certainly suggests a lack of honesty and transparency. So there we are, more than enough evidence already to suggest that Liz Truss is a disgrace as a minister. And that's even before we get onto her performance on these woeful post-Brexit trade deals. The first deal that she trumpeted as a historic moment was the one with Japan. In fact, it was that deal that earned her the nickname Liz Cut and Paste Truss, as it largely replicated the EU deal with Japan that had been agreed 2 years earlier. And her own department boasted that the deal had potential gains for the UK economy of a massive 0.1%. But it gets worse. 0.1% better than no trade deal with Japan, but no better than if we were still in the EU and benefiting from the trade deal between Japan and the EU. Is this one of the big Brexit successes we were being told were going to happen? The huge achievement of making sure that things aren't any worse than before we left the EU in our trade with Japan? Wow. Deeply impressive, I'm sure you'll agree. Another trade deal held up as a shining example of our Brexity freedom is the one with Australia that is currently under negotiation. You know, the one that is receiving a huge backlash from British farmers as they face a wave of growth hormone-infused meat from Australia that will undercut their product with zero tariffs and zero quotas for the next 15 years. The one that the National Farmers Union described as wholly irresponsible. The one where Liz Truss's department leaked her childish plan to sit the Australian Trade Minister in an uncomfortable chair for 9 hours to get a deal across the line. I mean, clearly this idiot Tory is a national embarrassment. I mean, viewers of this channel may think I can get a bit angry. And I admit it, I can. But I get angry about things like child poverty, Tory corruption, austerity in food banks, the hostile environment for migrants, Windrush and systemic racism, Tory incompetence on COVID, our broken legal system, our inadequate response to climate change. What does the idiot Truss get angry about? Well, let's take a look, shall we?
We import 2/3 of our cheese. That is a disgrace.
Good grief. But as well as having the naive and inexperienced Truss as our trade minister, there are other problems in getting good trade deals. You see, the trouble with Britain being a much smaller player on the global trade stage than the EU is that we have nowhere near the buying power, nowhere near the clout that the massive EU single market has. That's partly why this trade deal is so heavily weighted in Australia's favour. The other reason is that, like with all Liz Truss's trade deals, this Brexity government is desperate to demonstrate Brexit wins, and our potential trading partners are well aware of this. That's why Truss is having to sign up to a load of trade deals that benefit the other country way more than they benefit us. I can foresee that in a few years, looking back at the commitments that Liz Truss has tied this country into, future governments will be shaking their head in disbelief at how much she gave up in these trade deals and how little she got in return. But moving on from trade, she is also, somehow, still the Equalities Minister too. An Equalities Minister who appointed the ex-Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott as co-president of the Board of Trade. This is a guy who is homophobic, misogynist, and who believes that gay couples should not be allowed to raise children. Truss claims that his views are not relevant to his appointment to the Board of Trade. But earlier this year, 2 of the government's LGBT advisors resigned because of concerns over Liz Truss's ignorance of key LGBT issues and her part in the government's creation of a hostile environment for LGBT people. One of the advisors, Jane Ozanne, said that within the LGBT community, Liz Truss was known as the Minister for Inequality. This is partly due to the fact that after 2 years of pledges on banning gay conversion therapy, she has done absolutely nothing to stop this harmful practice. So there we are, a very brief explanation of why Liz Truss is unfit for office and a complete disgrace as a minister.